Hello everyone! Today we are doing perspective, which is why I have something I don't use a lot in art out right now, my ruler, because for this lesson we're going to be using a lot of straight lines and edges and stuff like that. Okay, let's dive right in. What do I mean by perspective? Well, when we're drawing a setting like this, we can see that this is a group of trees that are all the same size effectively, but you can see that this one is a lot bigger than this one just because of how we're looking at it from this side and how the perspective makes it smaller as the distance increases. Okay, but how do we know how big to make these trees? For example, if I know that these are all the same size, how do I know that the next one has to be exactly this tall? Well, in this example, I was just eyeballing it, I'm going to be honest, but there is a way we can know for sure, and it's a really fun concept to play with so that you can give your settings more variation and have it come from many different perspectives. For our first example, we'll look at this row of buildings. Okay, so if you notice on this side, each of the buildings have two edges here. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna try and connect those edges. So we're just gonna put our ruler up against the edge. And I'll do the same for the other edge. Yeah, this is gonna go off the paper, but now the interesting thing about this point right here is that when we line it up with the edge of the other building, we can see it creates the perfect edge and it lines up with all the other buildings. Even this shorter one, it forms the exact slant that we need for these buildings. So what is this point? This is called the vanishing point. This is the point where these buildings get smaller and smaller and smaller to the point where you can't see them anymore. They vanish. But if you've ever looked down a one-way street, you can see how obviously the street doesn't go forever, but if it did, you could imagine that at the end there would be a vanishing point from which all the buildings come out and connect. That's cool. Let's look at something else. So we've gotten these two edges. What about these edges? How do we know what angle to draw them at? Let's do the same thing that we did. You can see over here is where our other vanishing point will be. And yes, as expected, if we draw lines from this point, we can get the lines for the other buildings. So let's do that. And you can see this looks a lot more like correct than the edge that I had drawn because it fits in with the perspective. So that's pretty cool. But there's something else about these vanishing points. I'm gonna need to zoom out a little bit for this. Okay, now you can just barely see both of them. But I've connected both of these points with a line. And if we look at it closely, we can see that if this was a bunch of buildings, and then we imagine the space beyond it and we kind of extend the picture, we can see that here would be the point where the ground stops and the sky begins, otherwise called the horizon line. So we can about imagine a setting sun right over here, and this is where the mountains would be seen. You get what I mean. This is the horizon. How is this horizon line relevant to our picture? Well, everything below the horizon line, we're going to be looking at it from top-down view. So we're going to see the top of these buildings. But if something was, for example, above the horizon line, like a plane, we would see the bottom of the plane. So just for reference, let's draw a block up here. We're going to use our vanishing point so we can get the correct perspective. So the good thing about having vanishing points like this is that you get half of your work done for you already. And you don't need to spend time figuring out, oh, what angle should this line be? Okay, so now using both of these points, we have gotten the bottom of the box, and now we could see some item that is floating in the air, and this is kind of showing us how important these 2 points are for anything that you want to draw in this setting at all. So yeah, I hope you can see how these are really helpful. And now we're gonna move on to some examples.